Meet Alena. She's a watchmaker based out of Seattle, and so, of course, we find our way back to TimeWorks. I'm the Timist. Grab a seat and listen to her story about how she got into watchmaking.
Thank you all for coming here and joining us, and thank you, Judy, for putting this on. Appreciate you. All right, so this is, just a picture of me working. And I started, before watchmaking, I was in automotive mechanics in Arizona in the early 2000s. I attended school there and worked as a mechanic in Arizona. And if anybody knows and has been there, it gets pretty hot, and it's not a very romantic story how I started into watchmaking. I was working at Pep Boys in Tempe, and got, it was about 115 degrees, and I didn't drink enough water, and I got really sick that day, and went home and decided I was going to find a job in air conditioning. So I went into the local mall, and my dad had a guy who he used to take his watches to and change his batteries and work on them. And he was looking for someone to help and be a technician. And I went in there and I said, you know, I work on cars. I'd never worked on watches before, but are you hiring? And he said, yes, and put some watches out for my interview and said, change the batteries on these, this is how you do it. And he excused himself and went to the restroom, and I changed them when he was gone, and he came back and he said, I didn't know you were gonna start yet. He's like, but you're done. And I said, I'm done. He said, can you start on Monday? So that is how my career in watches started, and that was about 11 years ago. So I think probably a year, if that in, I really loved it and realized I always want to do this. I love the tiny, smaller mechanics, and that I just kind of found my passion. And so I worked there a couple years and then started researching schools and found the one in Seattle and applied to it. And it took a couple years to plan and save up to go to the school, and then I applied when I was ready and was accepted and packed everything in a U-Haul and my dog and some clothes and moved to Seattle to attend the program that's here, the Watch Technology Institute. And this is me. As you can see, some of the photos, my dad's garage. I would go in as a kid and take tools and take different things and try to, play with them at a very small age. So my mom kind of just told me she always knew that I would do some, work with tools. And then myself, when I was a mechanic, a friend of mine who came into town for this is actually her old roommate that I was a mechanic with. And then I picked up welding on the side. I had a job welding in Arizona to kind of save up extra money to go to school in my mid-30s, so I'm trying to figure out logistics. So I did that really fun job that I loved, and then applied and was accepted into the school here and came to Seattle. So the school here, it's a 3,000-hour program made in partnership with Rolex at North Seattle College. There's a couple of students here that are visiting, so I appreciate you all being here. There's me as a student. And it's a really great program. Seattle is very lucky to have it. And then Tim, who's in the back, actually, I worked for him for Ben Bridge. I was hired when I was finishing up my second year, so I started pretty quickly after graduating. So I worked for Ben Bridge, and I was a Rolex watchmaker at their corporate building that's kind of near the Space Needle. So that was some photos from just the different things that we work on a daily basis there. So there's crown polishing and the different movements that we would work on. There was still a good friend and mentor of mine at the time where I worked with his team. And I really liked working in an environment with a bunch of different watchmakers, because coming out of school, it was a lot of really talented older guys, including Tim, that would teach me different things. And so coming out of school, you have different practical knowledge that happens that you need to learn about that you don't necessarily learn in school. So it's really nice to be able to learn from everybody there. And this is a class I would often rivet Miguel would help me rivet the Rolex buckles a lot, and this was another classmate of mine and working in the back there and teaching him how to do that when he started. So it was a really great place to work. All right, and this is probably about my first year of school. I started doing engine turning classes and on a rose engine, it's a lathe that engraves geometric patterns, and the decoration on those, as some of you may know, has been used in watchmaking for a very long time. You can kind of see pictures of different patterns. And I learned the school there's actually one of my other mentors and friends who's here tonight, Nico. Her shop is Memoria Technica. And I started taking the classes with Brittany, and she took me under her wing, and we became friends as well, and a mentor. I'm very appreciative of her. And I think tonight the mall is talking a little bit about just kind of female forward and things, and being in an industry that doesn't have a lot of women, it's very important and helpful in school for me to have other women in the industry that helped me through, and I would call and ask questions, and technical and personal sometimes, and just kind of help you navigate that world. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to learn at the time beyond the curriculum that the school had, and I was just curious about the different machines. I love all sorts of machines, and it was a great opportunity to be able to learn engine turning, among other things, from Brittany. And yeah, over the next 7 years, I've assisted her in conservatory cleaning of antiquarian horological objects, lectures that she does, shop zine that we did for a little bit, assisting in automaton repair, working on a local street clock, and most recently studying enamel. And so these are all things that she's incredibly talented in, and I was very lucky to get to learn from her. She's a local watchmaker also, so really great to have her in my life. And yeah, there was one pattern that I liked a lot, which called the Moire pattern. And I remember she kind of was pushing me to learn the other ones, and I wanted to learn this one very well before I moved on. So I studied that pattern for years, I think, just until I felt familiar with it and I got used to it. And yeah, recently I have moved away from that pattern and doing interference pattern on a straight line engine, which does up and down instead of spiral that way. So there is a project that I did when I was in school. So I built my very first dial in Nico's workshop. And these are some pictures from it. So I picked the pattern, Moire, that I wanted to do, studied how to make dials, and made my first dial when I was a student. And there's some pictures of kind of the process of that here. And yeah, I know I said this, but having a female mentor out of school was really important to my career. The last time there was a survey, I believe it was 6% women in our industry for watchmakers in the US, which is pretty crazy small. I don't know if it's bigger than that, but that's kind of shocking when you think about it. So it's really good to have other females in the industry that you can talk to and kind of show you how to navigate the industry. Yeah, and having her in my life definitely kept me going a lot of days. There's us working on a clock downtown together, and us in her workshop recently doing enameling, and a funny caricature that we did with an automaton and a watch that I think looks like us. The person did a good job. Yeah, so it's definitely, I've spent a lot of time, thank you, working with Nico in her shop, and it's, I think that's super important to have other people in your industry that you can talk to and look up to and get advice from, whether was the older gentleman at Ben Bridge or Nico, and there's other mentors of mine that I've had, and I think it's important all through life. So most recently, after I left Ben Bridge due to COVID reasons, basically I ended up starting my own company, which I never thought I would do. So I contract myself out as a watchmaker for different companies around the US. And one of them is Aries. It's in Stanwood, Washington. They machine and assemble their cases, which has been really fun for me. I've always enjoyed machining. We do a lot of dive watches, and so I always have really been drawn to men's tool watches because there's different aspects of watches, and there's the functional aspects, and then there's also, they're great to look at and they're neat, but I've always been very intrigued and drawn to kind of the science that goes behind what makes a watch be able to go yada yada depth, underwater, or the different materials that can be used, like titanium or steel, and how are they machined. And there's a lot of aerospace machinists that you work with, and you'll bring it to them and they'll say, this is so small, this is difficult. And so to think about having a small watch case be difficult for a very extremely talented aerospace machinist is pretty interesting to think. And there's quite a few of them who it's challenging and it's fun. So I really have enjoyed working with this company. One really fun thing about this, speaking about other females, so Tristan is in the middle. I hired her about 1.5 years ago as a technician. So she started doing what I did when I first went to watches. So she works on quartz and batteries. So I hired and trained her. Also trained, there was a watchmaker out of the school that I hired for them, and then also training the owner's 2 sons. But Tristan, she was kind of the first young woman that I interned after the women that helped me through school. I've been teaching and training her. So she's very dear to my heart. She used to work for jewelry, the jewelry industry. And we work pretty close side by side for the last 1.5 years. She recently, last week, I helped her get a full ride and travel for her very first watchmaking course. So she moved last week from quartz to mechanical instruments. AWCI, it's the American Watchmaking and Clockmaking Institute. It's in Ohio. I'm a board member and I help out with teaching there as well. And she went with me. They helped fly her out and covered room and board, and her class was paid for. So she's in her early 20s and wouldn't have been able to pay for any of that, and is very excited and wants to learn more. So the fact that she could fly out, and she attended the class that I was teaching last week. So she was in the front seat while I was teaching in the front row, and it was fun for me, except when she would kind of roll her eyes or give me a hard time while I was teaching. She's a character, but then it made me laugh, and we have a fun dynamic, and she's just so intelligent and works very quickly and is pretty incredible. So yeah, she has, in the top right, you can see that's her first certification, and that was me giving her a hard time in return and taking pictures of her while she was working in class last week. So that was really neat to have her there. So besides Aries, there's a couple other companies that I've worked with as a friendship or with for my company. There's one in Canada, the only one not in the US right now. So there's me helping out in Vancouver, in Gastown, with another watchmaker who is wanting to, so this is the watchmaker there, Jason. Him and his wife own this company. And they have another younger watchmaker, and he will try to do some sort of mentorship program through AWCI too. So there's a lot of really good opportunities for education for people who are interested in watchmaking. Besides going to Canada, I really enjoy meeting other watchmakers around the world, I think, in my profession. This is a really dear friend of mine that lives in Arizona, where I grew up, Darren Tiffany, and he has his own watch company and has really pushed me recently to excel in my career and go. I've always worked for other companies, and him and another friend, Zach, have both been pushing me to make my own dials and make my own watch cases. Learn CNC, CAD design with Fusion 360. Very big learning curve, but the last year or so I've been learning to do those. So there was the dial that I did in Nico's shop when I was in school, and then most recently in December I did 2 other designs, and then over the summer went back and did more work. So the dials were first. So this is a Rose engine that he actually built himself, which is really neat to work on. I only had worked on Brittany's before, so it was really neat to kind of take everything that she taught me and work on someone else's machine. It was really neat to do. And then the bottom is kind of the dials afterwards. We engraved our names on the inside of them, so the wearer isn't gonna see our names, but they are underneath, and we know they're there. And any watchmaker will see them someday, maybe. Yeah, so these are the different dials that I first did in December. So there's a couple of them that the local watch collector group, Red Bar, a friend of mine in there that took the photos for me. It was very nice of him. And then most recently this summer, working on my first case design. So I kind of drew and sketched and then tried to learn on CAD how to draw a case. And it has just the different holders that we use, and then the dials will be the engine churning that I've been studying, but the case aspect of it is very new and exciting to work on and learn. So it's, we fitted it for the ETA 7001 movement because my friend Darren, who's teaching me about this, he designed a 3/4 bridge that he's been very passionate about. So then we can kind of do a collaboration and put his movement design and bridge into the case. So it's just been really fun to work with a friend on this project. And we did the first one with bronze, and it has a platinum engine turn dial. And think that we'll do a stainless one for his wife next, but this was the first one that we worked on. And here is kind of so far what I have, and it's in, you all are seeing it before it's completely put together. So I'm doing some movement work, and then there's blued hands that will go over the dial. Yeah, that was the first time that I tried it on, is that picture in my kitchen. So there are some other females that I wanted to talk about in watchmaking that I have looked up to and have conversations and friendships with them, and they've all affected my career in one way or another in very positive ways, and I just wanted to highlight some of these women. So Rebecca Struthers is in the UK, and very incredible. I'm sure a lot of people in this room maybe have heard of her, but she's a multi-award winning designer, watchmaker, and historian in horology. And she's known all over the world for her watches, as well as becoming the first person in British history to receive her PhD in horology. Very impressive. So I always thought that it was neat because you hear kind of, people will ask you when you're a female sometimes in the industry, like, what's it like, you know, or to be female? And it's better when it's just not talked about sometimes. And so I really like that a lot of times when you read about this achievement, it'll say the first person. It won't say, oh, the first woman, but she was the first person to do it. So that's really remarkable. And she works with her husband in their shop in the UK. And she has lectures and a new book called The Hands of Time, which I highly recommend everyone buying that book and reading it. She's pretty incredible. And I talked about earlier, embarrass you, you're in, Nico that's in the room. So Brittany is another pretty amazing watchmaker. She's a world-known antiquarian horologist. She's been featured in National Geographic, been on CNN, and a lot of other editorials. She teaches classes on engine turning and is considered one of the best in the world. She's given many lectures on different horological subjects and created a dial recently for the Swiss watchmaker Ludwig Ballard. And she created this automaton, Coachella, which is really neat and has been in a bunch of museums. And this is really close-up of the dial collaboration that she just did. So this is my teacher and mentor's work with the engine turning. So very incredible. And the numbers, when it goes to the time, they flip. So they spin to go right side up. Really remarkable watch. Yeah. And yep, pretty cool. Another favorite watchmaker of mine, Eva Loueve. She designed this incredible watch that curves. So the gears go up and down, and then they actually curve as well. So if you think the engineering to do that is pretty impressive, and she does all of it herself. And she's a German-born watchmaker who has received master watchmaker certification in Germany, but now lives in Australia. And then she also was a Rolex, Thomas Prescher, and Ulysse Nardin watchmaker before she started her own company. And this watch she actually named after her first son, Ari. So that's her Ari watch. Yeah, very incredible woman. And there is Celeste Wong, who actually next door has watches for sale, which is really neat. So Ben Bridge sells Celeste's watches, but it's the Celeste Watch Company, Pacific Northwest base in Oregon. And she was a biomedical engineer turned watchmaker, has used her engineering to create fine timepieces with inlay. So you can actually there's some designs, and this is one that's Northern Lights. And then you can also get photographs. I like the one with the motorcycle, and she will make inlay with those. So yeah, that is, I guess besides all of that, there is really exciting new program. I work as a teaching assistant at the school that I attended at North Seattle, and they have a women mentorship program there that is just rolling out this year. And there's a student here that's visiting, that's a part of that. So really neat program. Another funny story that I don't even know if I ever told this to Tim, but when I first moved here and knew I was going to the school, I was walking around downtown, and I went in and visited Ben Bridge, and I remember my dad and I are really close, and he was kind of visiting, checking out my new neighborhood, and I remember telling him this is where I would like to work someday if they'll hire me after I graduate, so thank you. Really cool.
Alena also took questions from the attendees.
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's, my answer for that goes from the creativity standpoint, and I think I've seen newer designs coming out and shapes coming out that are different that we haven't seen, and then there's always the classic style that comes out, and I think both are kind of different, and there's different types of people who like both, and I think that the improvements on the classic styles, I think, will continue, and then I think the more adventurous ones will continue to kind of get more interesting and fun also. I think a lot goes into each part that people don't realize, and I think the movements, people look at the dial and they look at the case, people who collect, and unless you're sitting, there were so many things when I was in school and then my first job looking at the insides and realizing all of the innovation and things that go into them that normally people don't see. Now there's different videos, that you can watch, and people are starting to realize, oh, everyone does want to see this stuff that typically the watchmaker would just see. So I think the movements are pretty incredible. I'm looking at Nico laughing right now because it took The actual dial took me a day to work on, but getting to the point where I could do it in a day took years. So I think the answer is years, because it took me literally years studying under her and messing up, and before I could get to the point where I could finish it. And it's a difficult thing to where when you're first starting, if you're not full concentration while you're engraving it and someone distracts you or you forget the math or the counting, you mess it up and you have to completely start over. And it's just the most extreme amount of frustration. So took me years to get to the point where I could sit and do one without, I think. Do you think that's a fair answer to that? Yeah. Well, I would say that I didn't really work on any. It was more you saying, hand me this, hand me that. You are the expert. But I think my favorite was the dog, the barking dog. So it was a little dog that jumps and barks and moves. I love dogs, as you know, so that was definitely my favorite one. I think books. There's really awesome books out there. There's a George Daniels book. There's a Bulova watchmaking school book. That's one of my favorites. Just getting any of the books, and even if you open them and it seems like it's too much, just keep reading it and kind of go back after a while, and each time you read it, you'll understand more and more. And I think just different books that you can find online are, in my opinion, the best way to learn. Especially the older, the better sometimes. There's newer technology that you can learn, but sometimes the older books have the basics to learn from. I think that there's the school here. There's a couple really big service centers here. And I think Seattle's always been kind of a creative city where a lot of creative types are attracted to the place. And as well as you think of, Boeing or other engineering types. And when you mix engineering and creativity, I think a lot of those people like watches. I think it attracts a lot of us. Yeah, it is a lot different. There's a lot more resources, I think, with the bigger service centers, and so there's a lot more watchmakers. A lot of the independents, oftentimes it's working. I worked out of a Connex at one point for one person, another couple people out of their garage in their home. There's other people, they have maybe small workshops, the size of this with machines. It's a lot smaller scale, and oftentimes I think why a lot of them have needed to help or contract has been they can't do everything themselves, and they're a lot of times don't have an employee, and so it's one person doing everything. They're doing the machining, they're trying to put the hand and dials on whatever movements they're using. There are a lot, four of the guys I've worked for, they're machining their cases and doing the movements. So that's a lot, where in the bigger companies, I think it would be more just movements that you would work on. So that's a lot differences with that, and just a lot longer hours for a lot of them. It's a really incredible thing to see, kind of what I feel like is American watchmaking revival almost, where there's, different people getting interested in just trying to do things here, is really incredible to see. I guess my advice and answer to that, I know there's different opinions on it, but mine would be to always send it to a place like, Ben Bridgetson has certifications and they're getting the parts, and that they're real parts, you know, it's a certified watchmaker. That would be hands down what I tell everyone that asks me. I know there's different opinions on it, but I think it is the value of sending it to a place where you know that the watchmakers are trained, you know that the parts are the accurate parts. You're not taking a gamble, you know, like it's the same if you have a classic car, you know, that you cherish, you wouldn't want to take it to 20-year-old me at Pep Boys to do work on it, you know. Like it's kind of similar with that, where I think having the people that you know have the training is my advice for that always. Both, depending on the outfit. I'm just kidding. If I'm going, there's days where I want to know the date and I'm at work and I have a lot of things and I need to know it. But I think a lot of mine actually are no date. I like this symmetry of no date. I have a couple that have a date and it's purely functional if I needed to know that, if I'm traveling or I need it for work. But I think aesthetically, I should know the date every day, and if I don't, then I need to kind of rest and check myself and take some time off of work. But aesthetically, yeah. Aesthetically, I think watches look really good with a no date. I like when the date's at the bottom sometimes though, but yeah. Good question. And what about you?
Whoa, I didn't expect that. Yeah, both.
Both, yeah. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
A huge thank you to Alena for sharing her story with us all. Now, you may have noticed a recurring theme. A lot of my videos are shot at Timeworks, and that's no coincidence. Judy, the Timeworks manager, cares deeply about her local watch community, and so she goes out of her way to provide a safe space for us enthusiasts to meet and share stories, learn, and laugh. Beyond the snacks, the drinks, the raffle prizes, and the beautiful space, Judy's welcoming approach and kind gestures have helped start a local watch movement. It is because of such kind gestures, all of which require many hours of prep and planning on her and her team, that Alena, myself, and many others have the space and the time to share our collective passions. So thank you, Judy and team. Timeworks is a shining beacon because of you. I'm the Timist. Thank you for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a favor and give it a like. Consider subscribing for more content like this, and as always, if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share, drop them in the comments below. Be well, and I'll see you in the next one.